Good evening. My name is Cedric Domingo, and today I'm going to be covering a brief case study I completed on advanced 3D UI techniques, specifically in the field of wearable medical technology. Today, I will be examining CardioCore's wearable electrocardiogram, which is the world's first and only FDA-approved medical-grade wearable EKG so far. This presentation is my submission for assignment 4 for Professor Kyungjae Lee's class at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, Info 4115, Human Factors and Web Design, and this presentation was created for the fall 2022 semester. Before we begin, I'd like to cover the agenda. Part 1 will be going over the literature and documents that I was able to find pertaining to this product. Part 2 will cover a summary of the product, as well as the background, market research, development history and process, and the current status and future plans. So, for Part 1, I'd like to briefly discuss the documentation I was able to find. This includes the US design patent, the FDA assessment of approval, and an independent study used to verify the accuracy of the product. So first, I'd like to briefly cover the US innovation patent granted to Cardio. So this product received a patent for the unique design back in 2013. Essentially, they filed a patent for the unique design, and that includes the positioning of the sensors that was required to create the 3D image of the heart. And of course, the claim was approved, and the innovation patent was granted to Cardio in 2015. It is considered valid until 2029. Next, I'd like to cover the FDA assessment. Following the approval of their product and their patent, Cardio sent in an application for FDA approval. And in 2021, the US FDA reviewed the product and approved it for medical grade use. Now, one main part that I'd like to highlight is the legal description for the product as stated by the FDA. The CardioCore device is a wearable device that captures information through a single channel ECG, which is encrypted and transmitted to their Cardio app. The CardioCore ECG ambulatory monitoring device is intended to capture, store, transmit, and display ECG information for recording periods of up to 24 hours. The CardioCore ECG monitor is a prescription-only device, and the reported information is provided for review by a physician. So the data collected, it's not meant for interpretation by the customer, but rather by a qualified healthcare professional for diagnosis purposes. Next, I'd like to go over an independent study on the accuracy and diagnostic validity of the product. In 2019, the Journal of Cardiovascular Disease and Diagnosis conducted a study with 31 patients, just comparing the accuracy of the wearable EKG compared to traditional EKG monitors and Holter monitors in the hospital. The study determined that the readings were accurate when compared to traditional EKG monitors, and that any variation in the measurements was considered clinically insignificant. The study concluded that the EKG monitor was a clinically valid tool, and it should be noted that the Journal of Cardiovascular Diseases and Diagnosis is an independent research organization. So as stated in their report, they have no biases pertaining to the product or the study. So, now that we've briefly covered the legal documents and studies revolving CardioCore's product, well, what is it? Well, in essence, it's the world's first wireless and patchless ECG. Currently, it is the only wearable ECG device on the market that has been FDA approved for medical grade use, and it allows for live EKG monitoring, as well as for heart rate variability, activity tracking, and respiratory rate. In addition, the CardioCore is water and splash resistant and transmits results directly to healthcare professionals. It's not only more comfortable and portable, but also much more concealable, which allows patients to have left the hospital to track their heart rhythms more conveniently. But of course, to better understand why this product is revolutionary, I think it would first be much more helpful to explain a little bit about what an EKG is, and why do healthcare professionals rely on them for diagnosis. So, what is an electrocardiogram, and what is it used for? Well, essentially an ECG or an EKG, both are the same. It's a device used to measure the electrical activity of the heart. So the general principle behind it is to place multiple electrodes at different angles around the heart. And essentially, by using sensors at multiple points, ECGs allow medical professionals to visualize the heart in 3D. Now, you might be wondering, how is this any different from Fitbits and other smart devices on the market? Well, one of the main differences is that with your Fitbits and your smartwatches, they're only capable of measuring heart rate, and that's interpreted in the form of beats per minute. And while this is still useful to consumers, it really only provides one dimension of an individual's cardiac health. Basically, this method of obtaining the reading differs as well. Instead of actually taking electrodes and measuring it around the heart rate monitors generally just use an infrared laser to read the amounts of hemoglobin and its concentrations, and it's usually just from a single point in the body. So whether that's the wrist, the chest, or the fingertip, it's generally not enough information for a healthcare professional to make an accurate diagnosis. So this is where the electrocardiogram comes in. In essence, an electrocardiogram also measures the beats per minute, so just like a Fitbit, but in addition, it also records the rhythm of the heartbeats, the size and the positions of the heart chambers, presence of damage to the heart's muscle cells, and presence of impaired blood flow to the heart. In addition, it also detects patterns of electrical activity in the heart, as well as the function and effects of implanted pacemakers and cardiac drugs. So compared to smartwatches, which only take readings from one part of the body, an ECG takes readings with multiple electrode sensors around the heart. And what this does is essentially it paints a 3D picture for healthcare professionals, which is interpreted as an EKG graph. And each part of the EKG graph actually relates to a different part of the heart. So for example, the P wave, as you can see in the animation above, provides information about the atria, whereas the T wave provides information about the ventricles. And just so that you can see, here's an example of how that data is visualized. Now, EKGs have been around for a long time. However, evolutions in the technology have been kind of slow. So the traditional EKG monitor that you'll encounter in the hospital is actually a test taken lying down. So on the most left-hand side, you can see an image of a patient with multiple electrodes attached to them. These are generally attached by using sticky pads or an adhesive. And what happens is the test is taken lying down, and the test is administered anywhere between 5 to 20 minutes before the pads are removed. So during this time, the healthcare professional is actually taking the readings directly from the heart in real time. The downside, of course, is that the patient is immobilized, and because the pads are quite sticky, it can be quite painful to remove. Of course, one of the pros of this is that you know that the test is accurate. However, again, the patient is immobile, they're not allowed to be doing anything, and it doesn't allow for long-term monitoring. The next evolution, of course, was the creation of the Holter monitor, which again, in essence, is just a little bit more mobile version of the EKG test. So instead of it being attached directly to the EKG reading monitor, it's actually attached to a Holter device, which again is attached either around the hip or around the neck. The downside to this, of course, is that, again, as you can see, those sticky pads are still there, and they can be pretty painful to remove. Sometimes it requires skin preparation, so the skin must be sanitized and often shaved, just because if you don't shave, it can be, again, pretty painful to remove them. In addition, you can't get them wet, so as the patient is wearing this, they are unable to shower or bathe, and again, because they usually have to keep it on for something like 24 hours, it just means that they're not able to really shower or clean themselves. And in addition, they're pretty bulky as well. They can weigh anywhere between 2 to 4 pounds. And finally, within the last decade, we begin to see the rise of the mobile ECG. So as you can see on the most right-hand side, it's actually the CardioCore product in this picture. With the mobile ECG monitors, essentially what they do is they allow patients to leave the hospital while still monitoring their cardiac health. And essentially, the manner of transmitting the results can differ. However, with the CardioCore, it transmits the results remotely using Bluetooth transmission. And currently, it weighs less than half of the current in-hospital Holter monitors. So they're only about a third of a pound, or about 130 grams, with batteries included. So, what does the market say about this? Well, a study completed by Precedence Research found that the global ECG market is actually projected to surpass $21.7 billion in the next 10 years. Furthermore, studies have shown that the market is growing at a compound annual growth rate of 6% a year, and factors for this include the global increase in cases of cardiovascular disease. So what we're seeing is more and more prevalent cases of heart diseases and heart dysfunctions. As a result, the ECG market is actually growing continuously. One of the main key trends for this market are handheld, wireless, and remote monitoring ECG devices, and currently the market is concentrated and fragmented, with few players occupying market share. Now, I'd like to cover a brief review of the current alternatives available. We have the Welly Portable EKG Monitor, the Kardia Mobile 6L EKG, and the BioCare 12-lead ECG machine. So these are all products available on the market for consumer use and retailer purchase. The first I'd like to go over is the Welly Portable EKG. So as you can see, it has a pretty cheap cost. It's about $69, which is might be appealing to customers. However, downsides include the fact that A, the battery life is short, and B, it's not considered a true EKG monitor. So as you can see in the product, it kind of looks like a watch. Again, a true EKG monitor actually takes multiple readings around the heart. So for this, it would simply just be interpolating results, but it would not be approved for clinical use. The next would be the Kardia Mobile. So as you can see, it almost looks like a button or a pad, and how this one works is you actually stick it directly on your chest. Again, while it is closer to an actual EKG monitor, you'll find that because of its small size, it's not actually able to take that many readings around the heart. So what you might get is 2 or 3 electrode sensors. But again, in addition to it being a little bit more pricey and not approved for clinical use, it's also not safe to use with pacemakers. The upside is the battery life is a bit longer and it's portable. But again, because it's not approved for clinical use, it would simply just be more of a device for consumers to use rather than a diagnostic tool. Finally, you have the BioCare 12-lead ECG machine, and in essence, this is essentially just your in-hospital monitor. This one is made for purchase and so for use at home. However, again, one of the downsides is that it's not portable, and just like with a traditional EKG monitor, you must be lying down. You're unable to move, and as you can see, the cost is also quite high. It's about $689. Now, currently, their development process started by seeking problems with the current design. They completed a survey of patients between 23 to 75, and they tried to identify problems with current ECG monitors. So one of the most common complaints that they received were the negative emotions due to the poor design. In addition, patients noted that the sticky pads that stayed on were uncomfortable, they could be painful to remove, and the device as a whole was just physically uncomfortable and stigmatizing. In addition, it can be quite troublesome to put on and apply, as again, because of the adhesive nature of the sticky pads, the skin is generally shaved and sanitized before the pads are placed on. Of course, patients are unable to bathe or shower as the pads are on, and generally they cannot be removed without the help of a medical professional. So basically what they did was they set out for a goal, and in the same year they laid it out. They wanted to reinvent the cardiograph by using a human-centered, user experience focused, anthropomorphic design to provide a solution in health tech and to address current problems with the standard ECG. So the following year they began development, and in 2015 they were able to file their patent. And of course, as mentioned earlier, in 2021 they received FDA approval for medical grade use. So just a quick timeline here of their achievements. And again, this is the Cardio Core, so it's meant to just be a product that users can use in their day-to-day life, again, without having to worry about the traditional stigma associated with wearing a Holter monitor. Currently, it is the only ECG on the market that is available for medical grade use, that is portable. In order to purchase it, one needs a doctor's prescription, and they've actually started allowing sales to them, both in the UK, the European Union, as well as in Canada. In August of 2021, they launched Cardio Direct, which is essentially just a mobile monitoring platform. So it allows healthcare professionals to monitor and review the patient's readings in real time. In August of this year, Cardio actually announced that it's pivoting its mission to bring healthcare not only to consumers, but to the healthcare industry as a whole. So in that month, in August, they actually appointed a new CEO who actually went on record to basically state that they are now pivoting their mission statement and they're looking to focus more on actual healthcare products, that is. Now, finally, I do believe that this is a revolutionary product. However, there are a few things that I'd like to point out which may be a concern for the product if they're not addressed. So my first critique of the product is its cost. So, of course, because it's new, it's proprietary, and it's medical grade, obviously it's no surprise that it costs about $400 to $600 a unit. However, this is pretty common for medical devices that are accurate enough for clinical usage, and I believe that as soon as the technology evolves, over time you're going to find that the cost to manufacture the product decreases as their scale of economy increases. The other thing I'd like to note is the possible privacy concerns that Cardio may have to address. So within the hospital, traditional EKG monitors, they're usually wired directly to a monitor which interprets the results. However, because of Cardio Core, it's a wireless monitor, so readings must be transmitted using a Bluetooth to the Cardio MD portal. And for me, this just raises concerns about privacy and the security of patients' medical information. And then finally, my final concern is the possibility of improper usage. And it's more so a matter of the accuracy of the readings if the product is used improperly. So generally in the hospital, nurses and doctors, they're trained for months just to correctly position the leads for the EKG. Now, this strapless, padless, wireless design is nice, and it's meant to comfortably fit around the human body. However, I believe that because if a professional does not get to see the patient put the wearable EKG on, then there's a possibility the customer may wear it incorrectly, which may result in incorrect readings. So in the product manual, it actually states that accurate readings can only be guaranteed if sensors are flushed against the body. Therefore, I do think that while the product does provide a sense of convenience, it's also important to point out the possibility of improper usage. Finally, I'd like to briefly go over my references. So on the right is a comprehensive list of the resources that I used for this presentation. And the other two are just two videos which I provided to provide more background on the topic. So the first is simply just the Cardio Core ad, which shows the product. And the final video that I'd like to show is just a simple video that explains how the EKG graph can be interpreted to provide a 3D view to medical professionals.
The heart's conduction system controls the generation and propagation of electrical signals, or action potentials, that cause the heart's muscles to contract and the heart to pump blood. This electrical activity can be measured at electrodes placed at specific points on the skin, from which a composite recording is produced in the form of a graph. This recording is known as an electrocardiogram, or ECG, sometimes referred to as an EKG, a tracing of the overall electrical activity of the heart, resulting from the propagation of many action potentials. Let's look at what happens during a single beat of the heart, and how these events are depicted on the ECG. In a normal heart, each beat begins in the right atrium with an action potential signal from the sinoatrial or SA node, the heart's natural pacemaker. The signal spreads across both atria, causing the muscle cells to depolarize and contract, inducing a phase known as atrial systole. On the ECG, this atrial depolarization is represented by the P wave. The period of conduction that follows atrial systole and precedes the contraction of the ventricles is depicted on the ECG by the PR segment, a flat line following the P wave. When the signal leaves the atria, it enters the ventricles via the atrioventricular or AV node, located in the interatrial septum. It enters the bundle of His, and spreads through the bundle branches and the large diameter Purkinje fibers along the ventricle walls. As the signal spreads through the ventricles, the contractile fibers depolarize and contract very rapidly, inducing ventricular systole. The ECG's QRS complex represents this rapid ventricular depolarization. Atrial repolarization also occurs at this time, but any atrial activity is hidden on the ECG by the QRS complex. Finally, as the signal passes out of the ventricles, the ventricular walls start to relax and recover, a state described as ventricular diastole. The dome-shaped T-wave on the ECG marks this ventricular repolarization. On the ECG, the ST segment depicts the period when the ventricles are depolarized. The QT interval represents the time it takes for both depolarization and repolarization of the ventricles to occur. The sequence of events just described and the associated ECG trace repeats with every heartbeat. Remember, an ECG is not a tracing of a single action potential, but an amalgamation of the many action potentials that constitute the electrical activity of the heart.
And that concludes my presentation. Again, my name is Cedric Domingo, student number 100272227, and this is my submission for assignment 4 for Professor Kyungjae Lee's class at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, Info 4115, Human Factors in Web Design, and this presentation was created for the fall 2022 semester. Thank you.